Okay, let's look at the function f of x equals x over 4 minus x squared. Let's do what we just did on the other video, finding the same sorts of important points and seeing what that graph might look like. Again, if I'm going to start with the intercepts, we're going to set y equal to 0. F of x is just another name for y, don't forget that. That's why I'm sticking the 0 in place of f of x. We also said that a fraction being equal to 0 means only the top is 0. We don't care about the bottom in this situation. Only the top, and so x equals 0 when x equals 0. That means the x-intercept is 0, 0. If I want to find the y-intercepts of the graph, and for it to be a function, which all of ours are, there will only at most be one y-intercept. But understand this is the steps that we would use, the process we would use to find all of the y-intercepts if we were looking at something else. Okay, again, 0 over 4 is equal to 0, so this didn't give us any new information. Okay, the only place we cross the x or the y-axis is at the origin. If I want to find the vertical asymptotes, I'm going to set the bottom equal to 0. Since it's a quadratic equation, I need to factor it correctly, or use the quadratic formula, but I would rather factor. Okay. Just because you don't like to see the x squared being negative does not mean that it can't happen. Also, you can't just switch it and put it in a different order just because you don't like it. That changes the value, so make sure you're careful there. The two values of x that make the denominator 0, are 2 and negative 2. If I plug in 2 to the top, I plug in negative 2 to the top. It doesn't make the top 0 in either case. So our two vertical asymptotes are the vertical lines, x equals 2 and x equals negative 2. If I want to find the horizontal asymptotes, we say we're going to check the degrees. The degree on the top function is 1, and the degree on the bottom is 2. So even though it's not in order of descending powers, my x squared term is not first, the 2 is still the degree there. Because the bottom degree is bigger than the top degree, that tells me the horizontal line, y equals 0, is my asymptote. And the degrees were the same on the last example, so we looked at the ratio of the leading coefficients. Okay, if there was an x squared on the top, then 1 over negative 1 would be our horizontal line. Okay, but because the degrees are different and the degree on the bottom is bigger, that means y equals 0 is our asymptote. Okay, now we also get to save some steps because last time we said, well, I have to check and see if I ever touch or cross that horizontal asymptote, and we've already solved this equation earlier on when we were checking for our intercepts, and so we know that it does cross that horizontal asymptote that happens at the origin. So when I go to sketch a graph of this function f of x, okay, my ordered pairs, my dots that I have to start with, aren't nearly as many as they were on the other example, which just means I'm going to get to fill in some of the blanks on my own. When it says that x equals positive 2 and x equals negative 2, that's where we're going to have our vertical asymptotes. Again, please draw asymptotes with dotted lines so I don't lose them in your x and your y axes. Too many solid lines in there. Okay. Also, and it's hard now that I have the axis drawn, but y equals 0. The x-axis is my horizontal asymptote. Again, the only ordered pair that I got out of any of that work up there is that dot right there. Okay. And that dot right there is not enough information to draw that whole graph. Okay, so again, I'm going to have to plot some extra points to fill in the blanks. Okay, so maybe I want to pick a number less than negative 2, so maybe negative 3. If I plug in -3 for x, I get -3 over 4 minus 9, which is a positive 3/5. So when x equals -3, y equals positive 3/5, which means here between 0 and 1. And again, that dot's all I need really to fill in that piece of the graph. Because as I go to the left, I know I don't ever touch or cross this line in this segment, because the only place I touch or cross is at the origin. As I go to the right, no matter how I feel about the graph, I can never touch and never cross a vertical asymptote. I'm going to do the other easier piece and skip to the right side of 2. I'm going to come down here, get stuff out of the way. And if I plug in 3 for x, I'm going to get the same thing, 4 minus 9, which is 3 over -5, so almost the same thing. If I go to the right 3 and down, okay, that's my starting point. Again, as I move to the left, I know I can't go up because then I'd cross that asymptote. So I have to go down, and I'm just going to hug that one. As I go to the right, again, I stay below it because I verified earlier that the only place I actually cross it is right there at the origin. Okay, so now that just leaves what happens in the middle. And so what I should do, to be sure, I should plug in 2 points. One to the left of 0 and one to the right of 0. So maybe I'm going to plug in -1 and 1. That gives me -1 over 4 minus 1, which is -1/3. If I plug in +1 for x, I get 1 over 4 minus 1, which is +1/3. So I'm at -1, -1/3, and +1, +1/3. And so now that I know the general direction, as I go to the right, I have to hug that asymptote. As I move to the left, I have to hug that asymptote. And again, if you plug this function into Desmos or something, it will be much prettier than mine, but it should have that general shape. Okay. Intercepts, we know how to find algebraically. They happen to be the same one. Vertical and horizontal asymptotes, we can find algebraically. Okay, once we get those, and we also checked to see if we touched or crossed that horizontal asymptote, which we did in both examples. Oftentimes it doesn't, but sometimes it does. Okay, from there, we put the dots and the asymptotes where they belong, and then I have to fill in with point plotting. I picked something to the left of that vertical asymptote, to the right of the rightmost one, and I picked 2 points in between so I knew exactly what happened. And I verified that the graph didn't maybe turn around and come back up like this, okay, or go down in both directions, because sometimes that happens. Okay, it doesn't always zig like that. Okay, play with some of these. Get a hold of me if you need me. Okay, practice, practice, practice.